The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We have all of the documents, and from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents.
Troubling accusations. President Trump says there's conclusive evidence against his first predecessor and his first opponent inside the new information.
One of the most important tenets in the doctor-patient relationship is, above all, do no harm. But what happened in these cases fractured the doctor-patient relationship.
Saving a life by taking one. How being an organ donor could put one's life in jeopardy, and what Congress is doing to change it. And fire season in the Northwest is in full swing. How firefighters are using new technology to fight the fires with hour-by-hour updates. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, we are glad you're here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Guilty of treason. That is what President Donald Trump says of his predecessor, President Barack Obama, at the White House during a meeting with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. President Trump turned a question about the Epstein investigation around into what he says is a much bigger scandal.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up all the way going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that.
The renewed controversy comes as Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is threatening criminal referrals of former Obama administration officials. She claims they manufactured evidence of interference. This contradicts findings by U.S. intelligence investigations, as well as a bipartisan Senate inquiry in 2020 that concluded Russia did interfere with the 2016 election. The office of former President Barack Obama cited those reports to say these accusations are false. And on top of that, the Department of Justice has just declassified documents some in Washington say provide evidence that important aspects of the Hillary Clinton email investigation were intentionally ignored. National correspondent Christine Frizzell has more on this second look into what we are learning now.
It's been about a decade since we first learned about Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server to conduct government business. But there are now new accusations of a botched investigation and a cover-up.
The FBI under James Comey said, we don't even want to know about this.
Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley says the new information stems from these documents he's been asking for since 2018, but have not been declassified until now. One finding that thumb drives containing some type of data have been in the FBI's possession, but the vast majority of this data has never been reviewed by the FBI, despite then Director James Comey saying this at the time.
What I can assure the American people is that this investigation was done honestly, competently, and independently.
Senator Chuck Grassley praising the Department of Justice for making the documents public.
These findings prove that the Clinton investigation wasn't thorough and complete. In fact, you could say they didn't even start to look at it.
Republicans have also been caught using private emails for government business, including the president's daughter and son-in-law during his first term. And just a few months ago, the president's Secretary of Defense was found to be sharing details of a sensitive military operation over the app Signal, bringing about cries of hypocrisy from Democrats.
This is the party that had dozens and dozens of hearings about Hillary Clinton's emails, and yet when it comes to the Signal Gate, where literally you had a member of the press being included on things with classified information, that we haven't had one hearing.
Former FBI Director James Comey is already under criminal investigation by President Trump's Justice Department for his role in the Trump-Russia probe. Senator Grassley says these declassified documents may bring about cause for an additional investigation. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The Justice Department says it will request a meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in prison for child sex trafficking in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. It comes after calls for Maxwell to testify about Epstein. This as the judge in her case is requesting more information before grand jury transcripts can be unsealed. The DOJ has until next Tuesday to provide it. And today, the House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Maxwell as lawmakers continue to react to the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein case.
More importantly, if we don't take the right side of this issue, it's going to cost us votes in the midterms. People are becoming despondent, they're apathetic. Why would they go vote if they gave us the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the transparency and justice they were promised doesn't happen?
And here's a live look over downtown Louisville, Kentucky, where today Democratic Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg announced they will comply with President Trump's immigration detainer policy and in return will no longer be listed as a sanctuary city. The policy requires migrants held on suspicion of a crime to remain in custody for at least 48 hours, and city officials will notify DHS of the arrest. This gives federal officials time to decide on how they want to proceed. Could being an organ donor put your life at risk? The House Energy and Commerce Committee held a hearing to follow up on an investigation released by the DHS looking into allegations that in 2021, a Kentucky organ donor was declared dead in the hospital when he woke up on the operating table as doctors prepared to remove his organs. According to HHS Secretary RFK Jr., witnesses from that incident said the Kentucky organ donor affiliates told the surgeon to do the operation or find another doctor who would.
As a member of Congress, we all swore an oath to protect the constitutional right to life afforded to each and every American. These incidents cannot be allowed to stand without strict investigation and oversight in the spirit of our constitutional oath.
The HHS report also found at least 8% of patients in the investigation may not have been deceased when the organ procurement procedure began. The House of Representatives are looking into an overhaul of the organ donor procurement and transplant system. Tomorrow, Bryan Kohberger will have another chance to explain why he murdered 4 University of Idaho students. President Trump said he hopes the judge will force Kohberger to reveal his motive at the sentencing hearing. The National News Desk Michelle Esteban has more on what to expect.
It is the unanswered question that has gripped a nation, and now President Donald Trump wants to know why Bryan Kohberger killed 4 young University of Idaho students in November of 2022.
Look, even the president of the United States wants to know what the motive was.
Trump took to social media, writing in part, "I hope the judge makes Kohberger, at a minimum, explain why he did these horrible murders."
I have never seen him or any other president come forward and say something to kind of put himself into the middle of a judicial process that's already well underway.
Longtime legal watcher and senior investigative reporter for Sinclair's Criminally Obsessed, Ann Emerson, said she was surprised the president weighed in, but thinks his sentiment speaks to the psyche of America, the victims' families, with that one unanswered question: why?
I would say the likelihood of Bryan Kohberger speaking to us in this sentencing is very low. But if we just go based on what we've already seen, he has really shown absolutely no emotion.
Emerson believes the evidence is more reliable than Kohberger.
You're dealing with a personality who has murdered 4 people. Do we feel like he is a reliable narrator to his story?
He has the right to address the court and the right to say nothing. He agreed to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty.
Death penalty is the ultimate in providing justice for my daughter. And I don't know what kind of father wouldn't want the most for their child. So I didn't want shortcuts.
Sentencing day is also about the victims' families, their chance to tell the court about their loved ones and the impact of such brutal deaths. But the prosecution plays a significant role, too, presenting arguments for the appropriate sentence.
We're going to get, to some degree, a story about what happened.
Heavy metal pioneer and icon Ozzy Osbourne has died. The English singer and songwriter known as the Prince of Darkness achieved international fame in the 70s as lead singer for Black Sabbath. His legendary status only grew after being kicked out of the band in 1979 for drug use when he ventured out as a solo artist. He famously bit the head off a bat at a concert in 1982. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for both his work with the band and on his own. Osbourne reached even new levels of celebrity when he starred in the reality TV show following his family, the Osbournes. He played his final Sabbath show just weeks ago to raise money for charity. Ozzy was 76 years old. Will certainly be missed even beyond the music community. Coming up, tens of millions of people are under severe heat alerts. How far a dangerous heat wave will spread this week. Then new evidence of severe damage to Iran's nuclear facilities and why a senior official says there's no chance the country will give up his nuclear program. Then why more hasn't been done to stop a concerning rise in violence against doctors and nurses. We'll be right back. Right now, nearly 70 million Americans are under heat alerts. Look at this map as a dangerous heat wave blankets the Mid-South to mid-Mississippi Valley, the upper Midwest midweek, then across the East Coast Friday into the weekend. The most dangerous conditions will be from the lower Mississippi to mid-Mississippi valleys. Residents in Washington, they are leaving their homes due to a wildfire that continues to spread.
To the left is where our home used to be. And we watched the flames go all the way up behind the house, and she just couldn't watch it from that point, and we had to leave.
Yeah, David Coran and his family, they lost their home. So devastating, which had been in his wife's family for generations. The Burdoin fire has burned nearly 11,000 acres since it started Friday with 0% containment. Residents remain under evacuation orders. Officials say 14 homes were destroyed. 37 were damaged. FEMA has authorized funds to assist with firefighting. In Oregon, the National Weather Service in Portland is working around the clock to provide forecasts for firefighters battling the Cram Fire, which has burned over 95,000 acres. The incident, meteorologists had been setting up remote weather stations next to the fire, getting hour-by-hour weather observations from firefighters on the line.
We also have what's called a remote automated weather station, which is a weather station that we put out in the middle of nowhere. And I actually set one of those up today. So I went out so I can measure humidity and precipitation, temperature and wind. And then we also have a unique one that we launch weather balloons.
President Trump is pulling the United States out of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. The State Department says that UNESCO has a globalist agenda and does not act in the national interest of the U.S. This isn't the first time the U.S. has distanced itself from the agency. In 1984, President Reagan withdrew in part because of a perceived bias against the United States. The U.S. rejoined in 2003 after many changes in the organization. Then, in 2011, under President Obama, the U.S. cut funding for UNESCO after they voted to include Palestine as a member. President Trump then removed the U.S. in his first term before President Biden rejoined the organization 2 years ago. UNESCO says they have prepared for this, and despite reduced resources, the effects will be minimal. Iran says they are not giving up on their nuclear program, despite admitting the U.S. attacks on their facilities last month did cause severe damage and set them back possibly years. National correspondent Acha El-Nashar reports on where negotiations for a new deal stand and what Iran is prepared to do to get their nuclear program back online.
It's been a month since Operation Midnight Hammer, the U.S. military strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities featuring the first practical use of 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs. U.S. intelligence officials and global atomic experts are still assessing the damage. Now, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, is giving new insight.
Our facilities have been damaged, seriously damaged, the extent of which is now under evaluation by our Atomic Energy Organization, but as far as I know, they are seriously damaged.
Araghchi says their atomic officials are still working to determine what's left of their enriched uranium stockpile. Last week, several outlets reported new U.S. intelligence that the Fordo site was mostly destroyed. The damage done to the other 2 sites, Natanz and Isfahan, was less severe but could take years to rebuild. The Pentagon calling the reporting false, standing by what President Trump has claimed since the strikes were carried out.
It was obliterated. You know, I used that term. They said, well, maybe that's too much. I said, no, it turned out it was more than obliterated.
Araghchi acknowledges their nuclear program is paused.
But obviously, we cannot give up our enrichment because it is an achievement of our own scientists. And now, more than that, it is a question of national pride.
He says the U.S. strikes are proof there is no military option for eliminating his country's nuclear capabilities.
The technology is there. The scientists are there. You know, the people who have run these facilities are there. Buildings can be rebuilt. You know, facilities can be rebuilt. Machines can be, replaced because the technology is there.
As for the future of talks between the U.S. and Iran, Araghchi says Iran prefers indirect negotiations and only if the U.S. halts its objective of seeing Iran give up its enrichment capability. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Coca-Cola confirms it is releasing a new Coke made with cane sugar this fall. President Trump says he convinced the soda company to switch to cane sugar from the cheaper high-fructose corn syrup. He and Health Secretary Kennedy argue corn syrup leads to obesity and diabetes. Experts warn too much of any type of sugar leads to those conditions. Coca-Cola says it'll keep Coke with corn syrup. It's just adding a new product with cane sugar. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Ohio, where 911 services are getting upgrades to save time and lives.
Inside 911 dispatch centers across Ohio, it's a constant battle staying up to date with technology.
And our folks here are always trying to find ways to be better at what they do, to be faster at what we do.
Hamilton County has been upgrading its systems. Dispatchers can also receive text and pictures and videos from callers. One of the biggest changes is how accurate a caller's location has become.
You can see all these dots. This is each time they've moved.
Their location can be narrowed down to just a few feet. The 60-cent fee added to your cell phone bill will go toward the construction and rollout of next-gen 911 throughout Ohio. Hamilton County dispatchers are currently taking calls here, but they've outgrown this space, and to meet the demands of the new technology, they're moving to a brand new center here to help with the expansion.
Solar-powered streetlights are coming to Nevada. A Florida-based company is taking advantage of the Silver State's sunny skies and installing the unique street lamps in Reno. The CEO of StreetLeaf says the lamp batteries have 3 to 5 days of backup power, keeping roads illuminated during a potential outage. He says solar streetlights will eliminate the infrastructure costs of installing traditional streetlights.
The wire, the conduit, the 30-foot metal pole out there, that is the majority of the cost, not the power. So going solar and battery powered eliminates that upfront cost and makes it cost effective today.
The company hopes to continue development throughout Nevada.
A cannabis cutback. TerraSun, a leading North America cannabis company, is ceasing all operations in Michigan. 20 dispensaries, including Pinnacle Emporium in Buchanan, along with 4 growing and processing centers, gone. The reason behind the big exit? TerraSun's executive chairman Jason Wild said it was a strategic decision, as Michigan is an extremely difficult market. Some say the market just isn't built for businesses.
I can't say I was very surprised. I know the market's a real hard market to be in right now.
The markup is definitely not what it was because it is oversaturated.
But others say it came as a surprise.
Coming up next, the action being taken to combat a surge in attacks on healthcare workers across the U.S. We'll be right back. Well, we count on them during our worst moments, but many of us don't even realize the constant threat faced by healthcare workers. Savage attacks from the very people they're trying to help. They're 5 times more likely to be injured by violence on the job than other lines of work. Spotlight on America's investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher is asking, why hasn't more been done to protect our critical caregivers?
Patients in emergency room triage are at their most vulnerable.
This is the room where I was assaulted.
But it is doctors and nurses across the country who are increasingly finding themselves defenseless to violent attacks in those safe spaces.
She basically stood up, punched me, and I did fall off my chair into this desk here.
Beaten and bruised, Maryland nurse Lisa Fisher was left with a black eye and 3 stitches.
You must have been so shocked and disoriented.
Totally shocked. I had no idea it was coming.
I've tried to get help.
But those unpredictable attacks are happening more often than you might think.
It is definitely on the rise. And it's not just here, it's not just my county or Maryland, it's nationwide.
Where is the injured nurse? The nurse is in the floor.
This Florida nurse was nearly beaten to death by a patient. This Pennsylvania gunman used nurses as human shields. And these are the faces of doctors recently murdered at work in Oklahoma and Tennessee. and it's getting worse. In 2015, a survey found 47% of emergency room doctors and 1 in 4 nurses reported being physically assaulted at work. 10 years later, a staggering 91% of ER doctors and 80% of nurses report violence on the job.
I can say, just in hospitals that I'm aware of, we've had, more than 6 incidents. Several nurses have been hospitalized. Several nurses have not been able to come back to work or have had permanent impairments. And that's just really in the last 2 or 3 years.
Only a dozen states have laws requiring healthcare employers create workplace violence prevention plans. Just this month, Virginia joined that list, requiring hospitals to create a system to document and track violence. There have been attempts at the federal level to protect healthcare workers, but none has become law.
When you look closely, this has become a real national crisis, really.
Maryland's U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen is co-sponsoring a bill that requires healthcare employers to create a violence prevention plan.
In 2021, a similar bill had 145 co-sponsors. In 2023, a similar bill had more than 170 co-sponsors, yet both times it got derailed. Where do you think the hiccup is?
Well, there's some folks that just don't like the idea ever of putting in place sort of workplace safety regulations. They prefer sort of a free-for-all environment. I think that's a mistake.
Who needs to buck up, and who's been preventing action up until now?
Well, we'll see. We've introduced this piece of legislation. We hope to get it over the finish line. We unfortunately, do not have, strong bipartisan support at this moment.
All right, I'm just going to put this on your arm.
Nurse Lisa Fisher says she's doing her job.
We're almost there, almost done.
It's time for Congress to do theirs.
We are here to help people. We are nurses that get into these unpredictable situations that are sometimes, out of our control. But being assaulted is not part of our job.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Coming up, the Earth is spinning a little faster this summer. How that could impact technology, we'll explain right after this. You may not realize it, but the Earth is actually spinning faster this summer, making some days ever so slightly shorter. The shortest day of this year so far was Thursday, July 10th, according to scientists. Today and Tuesday, August 5th, will also be relatively short. There are several reasons, like the moon's gravitational pull and the effect of the Earth's liquid core. It's not noticeable to people, but could impact computers and satellites in the long run. That's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening as we explore the findings as the Senate holds a hearing highlighting the flaws in former President Biden's border strategy. Much more to come on that. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. See you tonight at 10.